My daughter-in-law gave me a necklace and said, "Mother-in-law, wear it every day. It's important." A week later, I noticed a tiny dot between the stones. It was a hidden camera, so I did something she definitely didn't expect. I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I used to think my life in Maplewood was as steady as the morning light that came through my kitchen window. I had routines, quiet, predictable ones. I watered my ferns every Monday, walked the neighborhood trail on Wednesdays, and baked on weekends because the smell of cinnamon helped me think. At 59, I didn't need much more than that. Peace suited me. My son Daniel lived 20 minutes away with his wife, Lacey. They visited on Sundays for dinner, though recently those dinners had started to feel different. I couldn't explain it at first. Sometimes, when I entered the room, conversation stopped a beat too quickly. Or Daniel cleared his throat and looked at Lacey like he needed approval before he spoke. Small things. But small things have a way of adding up. I tried to be patient. I told myself Lacey was still adjusting to the family. She was younger than Daniel, smart, polished, career-driven. The kind of woman who always seemed to know exactly what she wanted. I respected that. I even admired it. But there was an edge to her, a sharpness behind the smiles, a softness that felt rehearsed. Still, I wanted to believe things were fine. One Sunday after dinner, she handed me a small velvet box. "For you," she said, "just because." I remember blinking in surprise. "Lacey, you didn't need to." "I wanted to," she insisted, her voice warm but her eyes unreadable. "Open it." Inside was a delicate necklace, thin gold chain, 3 small stones set into a teardrop shape. It was lovely, brighter than anything I usually wore, but tasteful. "Thank you," I said. "It's beautiful." She reached forward and touched my wrist lightly. "Wear it every day, okay? It's important." Important. The word had struck me strangely even then, but I smiled and nodded. Why wouldn't I? It felt rude not to. For the next week, I wore the necklace like she'd asked. I wore it to the grocery store on my morning walks while pruning the hydrangeas that never seemed to bloom right. And I noticed, again, only in the smallest ways, that Lacey checked whether I had it on. She sent texts. "How's the necklace? You like it?" If I sent a picture of something, my garden, a recipe, the first thing she commented on was whether she could see the gift. It felt odd, but I brushed it off. People show affection in strange ways, I told myself. Then Thursday happened. That morning had been quiet. I'd been cleaning, really cleaning, the kind of cleaning you do when your thoughts won't settle. I'd taken the necklace off so I wouldn't accidentally scratch it against anything. Later, when I picked it back up from the table, one of the stones caught the light at a strange angle, a tiny pinprick of darkness inside it, something too precise to be a flaw. At first, I thought it was dirt. I turned it toward the window. The speck didn't move. I angled it again. The reflection changed. But the speck stayed perfectly aligned, perfectly centered. A prickle ran down my spine. I fetched my old reading glasses, not the scratch pair I used daily, but the stronger magnifying ones I used for threading needles. I brought the necklace close, and there it was, a tiny black lens, a camera. My breath left me in one violent exhale. I sat back hard in the kitchen chair. Why? Why would she? I tried to steady myself. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe I was overreacting. But the longer I stared, the more undeniable it became. This wasn't jewelry. This wasn't a flaw. Someone had put a recording device into it. A functioning one? I didn't know yet. But it wasn't innocent. My hands started to shake. I placed the necklace on the table gently as though it might bite me. I thought of the past week, how Lacey asked me to wear it daily, how she commented on pictures, how she seemed almost too invested. I replayed the Sunday dinners, her watchful eyes, the sudden silences, Daniel's stiffness. Had he known? No, he couldn't have. Daniel was many things, but cruel wasn't one of them. Still, doubt whispered its way in. I walked around the kitchen because sitting felt impossible. My heart thudded so loudly I could feel it in my throat. I checked the clock, 10:14 a.m. Too early to call Daniel, too early to call anyone. And who would I call? Who would I trust with something like this? I returned to the necklace and stared at it again, my thoughts circling, spiraling. Was she watching me? Listening? Recording? The idea made my skin crawl. And then another question formed, darker and heavier. What did she want? Everything in me rebelled. This was my home, my life, my privacy. And she dared to... I clenched my jaw. I thought of marching straight to their house, throwing the necklace at her feet, demanding an explanation. But that would be emotional, reckless. And if there was a camera, then destroying it now meant destroying the only proof. No, I needed to think, to understand what I was really dealing with. I sat back down, pulled the necklace toward me, and whispered to no one. She has no idea who she's dealing with. Not anger, not yet, just a cold gathering clarity. I didn't know what Lacey expected me to do with her little gift, but I knew exactly what she didn't expect. She didn't expect me to stay quiet. She didn't expect me to plan. She didn't expect me to fight. And as the morning light shifted across the table, catching the false sparkle of that hidden camera, I knew this was only the beginning. The rest of that day moved strangely, as if every object in my house had shifted half an inch to the left. Familiar things felt unfamiliar. Even the quiet I usually loved, pressed in on me like a weight. I kept glancing at the necklace on the table. That tiny black dot seemed to pulse each time I looked at it, as if it was waiting. By noon, I'd boiled water for tea twice and forgotten to pour it both times. My thoughts wouldn't settle. They spun in circles. Violation, humiliation, confusion, fear. Every emotion tugged at me at once, and I couldn't tell which one hurt the most. I tried to ground myself the way I always did, with movement. I walked from room to room, letting my fingers brush over the furniture. My home had always been my sanctuary, a place where I breathed fully. But now it felt infiltrated. Or maybe I felt infiltrated. What else had she watched? What had she heard? How long had she planned this? The questions made my stomach twist. I sat in the living room and forced myself to think logically. I needed to understand the stakes. I'd spent years teaching myself that fear is manageable when you list things out, when you confront them head on. So that's what I did. Potential losses. My privacy, already violated. My peace of mind, cracked. My relationship with Daniel, at risk. My reputation, if Lacey spun this into something else. My financial safety, if she wanted something more than surveillance. My independence. That last one chilled me the most. At my age, independence is a fragile thing. Hard to earn, easy to lose. One accusation, one manipulated situation, one misunderstanding, and a woman in her late 50s could be painted as forgetful, unstable, paranoid. Lacey was the type who could make that painting look convincing. The thought made fear bloom low in my chest. But even beneath the fear, something else was forming. Slow, deliberate, like a tide turning. Resolve. I wasn't going to crumble. I wasn't going to let her corner me in my own life. But I also wasn't going to be impulsive. Not with someone like Lacey. She was cunning, calculating. If she had resorted to installing a camera, then this wasn't a whim. This was part of something bigger. So I needed information. Around 2 p.m, I gathered myself enough to sit at my laptop. I kept the necklace on the other side of the house, in the laundry room, just in case. I searched for camera hidden in jewelry law, camera recording consent, home state regulations, what to do if someone plants a hidden camera on you. Most results were vague, but one thing was clear. Recording someone without consent inside their home was illegal, extremely illegal, a serious offense. That realization steadied me. I wasn't the one in danger, not legally at least. They were. Still, I didn't trust myself to navigate this alone. I opened another tab, typed, Local Legal Aid Consultation Hidden Camera. I found a small firm downtown that offered free phone consultations. I hesitated. My finger hovered over the dial button. What if I sounded ridiculous? What if I didn't explain it well? What if the camera was already broadcasting somewhere? Then I shook myself. No, enough spiraling. I called. A calm male voice answered. Good afternoon, Harrington and Shaw. How can I help you? I swallowed. I have a question about privacy law. He asked a few standard things, then transferred me to a woman named Carrie. Carrie listened patiently while I chose my words with care. I didn't mention names or relationships or anything that could escalate too fast, but I told her the essential truth. Someone close to me had gifted me jewelry containing a hidden camera. There was a long pause. Then she said very bluntly, "That's a felony." The word hit hard. Even though I knew it was serious, hearing it aloud made my hands tighten around the phone. She continued, "You need to preserve the evidence exactly as it is. Don't damage it. Don't confront the person yet. And do not continue wearing it under any circumstance." I let out a humorless breath. "I don't plan to." "If you choose to pursue charges," she added, "you'll need to document everything. Dates, conversations, photos of the device. But be cautious. People who go this far often escalate." That last part made fear spark again. But Carrie also told me something else. Something vital. You're not powerless. Evidence keeps you safe. Documentation keeps you safe. Information keeps you safe. And that, more than anything, cleared the fog. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long moment. Not shaken, focused. I needed to build a timeline, a record, a picture of what really happened. I took notes in a small leather-bound notebook. The date she gave it to me. Her exact words. Wear it every day. It's important. Her texts. The way she checked whether I had it on. The moment I discovered the lens. Writing it all down steadied my breathing. Next, I took pictures of the necklace with my phone. Close-ups, different angles, the lens in clear detail. I emailed the photos to myself and saved them in 2 separate folders, one on my laptop and one on an old USB drive. If Lacey was watching me, she would see nothing. Nothing except an older woman going about her day. But I was working. By evening, the fear had settled into something quieter. Still there, but no longer overwhelming. It reminded me of the early stages of driving in winter. how you feel the ice under the tires, but you keep both hands on the wheel and adjust. Around 8 o'clock, Daniel texted, "Mom, everything okay? Lacey thought you seemed off Sunday." I stared at the message. My throat tightened. He didn't know, or he was pretending. Both possibilities were painful. But I typed back something neutral. "Just a long week. How are you both?" He responded with a thumbs up emoji. That small distance between us hurt more than I expected. Later, as I prepared for bed, I passed the laundry room and saw the necklace resting where I'd left it. I paused. A strange mix of emotions washed over me. Disgust, betrayal, and a flicker of power. Because now I knew, and she didn't know that I knew. That meant something. That meant everything. I turned off the light and whispered into the dim hallway. I'm not the one who should be afraid. And in that moment, the very first shape of a plan, not a full one, not yet, began to form. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm, not from fear, at least not the kind that makes you hide under blankets, but from a sharp clarity that hadn't been there the night before. The kind of clarity that comes when denial finally burns off and leaves intention in its place. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. I looked at the notebook where I'd written everything down, and I knew exactly what I needed to do first. I needed a professional, someone who could confirm what the device was, what it could do, and whether it had broadcast anything. Someone who wouldn't look at me like a hysterical older woman inventing conspiracies. So I searched locally for a private security technician. Not the big companies. They're slow, expensive, and love paperwork, but small independents who do home sweeps for landlords and businesses. I found one in the next town, Mark Stevens, digital security consultant. I didn't mention my name when I called, just asked if he handled hidden cameras and personal items. He paused, then said, "You'd be surprised how often that comes up. You can bring it in this afternoon." At 1, I drove over. The building was a converted warehouse tucked behind a tire shop, ugly, windowless, but private. Perfect. Inside, Mark was in his 40s, quietly observant with the technician's calm. He didn't blink when I showed him the necklace. He didn't comment on the absurdity of it. Instead, he said, "Let me take it apart." I waited while he worked with tiny screwdrivers and tweezers. The room hummed with the sound of equipment. My heartbeat matched the rhythm. After 10 minutes, he exhaled sharply. "This isn't consumer grade," he said. "It's a micro HD pinhole camera with a short-range transmitter. Someone would have needed to stay within about 100, maybe 200 feet to receive the signal." My blood chilled. "So it didn't store anything?" I asked. "No, it streamed." "Live?" He nodded. I gripped the edge of the table. Someone had been nearby, close enough to receive whatever the necklace recorded, close enough to watch me inside my own home. Mark continued, "Judging by the model, the receiver is a simple handheld unit. You could buy it online if you know where to look, but whoever planted this, they knew exactly what they were doing." My suspicions hardened into certainty. Lacey wasn't playing games. She wasn't just being controlling or curious. She had a purpose, and she had a plan. "Can you give me something official?" I asked. "A report, photos, an identification of the device." "Yes," Mark said, "and you should take this to the police immediately." The words hit like a weight. I nodded slowly, my mind running through a dozen implications. Family fallout, confrontation, consequences that couldn't be undone. But there was no going back. This was my Tochka Nevozvreda. Mark printed a preliminary report. I paid him, thanked him, and drove home in a heavy silence. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw a car idling across the street. Lacey's silver SUV? My stomach tightened. She wasn't knocking, she wasn't texting, she was just there, watching, pretending she wasn't. Had she already noticed the necklace was missing? Had she already realized something was wrong? I didn't look at her. I didn't acknowledge anything. I simply walked into my house with the calmness of a woman who had information she wasn't ready to reveal. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Lacey, hi, just in the neighborhood. Everything okay? The chipper tone felt like a blade wrapped in ribbon. I didn't answer, and ignoring her, something so small in theory, felt unexpectedly powerful. But I also knew this. If she was watching me, if she had monitored my routines, then any break in those routines would alarm her. She would be suspicious. She would push harder. So I acted normal. I watered the ferns. I folded laundry. I opened the blinds. I played the part of a woman blissfully unaware. But inside, everything was shifting. Around 4, Daniel called. Not texted, called. That alone made my pulse jump. Mom. His voice was gentle at first, but tight. Lacey said you seemed distant lately. Is something happening? I swallowed. I'm fine, Daniel. Just taking care of some things. What things? There it was. The subtle pressure. The attempt to draw information out of me. I kept my tone light. House stuff, paperwork. You don't need to worry. He hesitated. Okay, just checking. But his voice didn't sound reassured. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a long moment staring at the muted television. Something was building. Something Lacey didn't want me to see until it was too late. And she was afraid. Yes, afraid. Because whatever she had planned required control. And I had disrupted that control. The next step was unavoidable. I needed to go to the police. But I wasn't ready to hand everything over yet. I needed to secure my own position first. I needed to understand the full picture. And I needed to move carefully, because the moment I made this official, the conflict would no longer be covert. It would become open and dangerous. That evening, I organized everything. Mark's report, photos of the camera, screenshots of Lacey's messages, a timeline of events, a copy on the USB drive, a second copy printed and placed in a sealed envelope. I tucked the envelope inside a cookbook on the shelf, the one nobody ever touched. As I did, my phone buzzed again. Lacey, want us to stop by? We're nearby. Nearby. Still nearby. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. She was nervous. She was monitoring. She could feel something slipping beyond her control. And that meant she would push harder. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned off the lights, brewed chamomile tea, and sat in the darkness, letting my thoughts settle. And that's when I heard it. Faint footsteps on my porch. Not knocking, not approaching, just listening. I didn't move. After a minute, the footsteps retreated. Her. She wanted to see if I was wearing the necklace. She wanted to gauge my mood, my behavior, my vulnerability. But she saw nothing. She knew nothing. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I wasn't the one on the defensive. I whispered into the quiet living room. You made a mistake, Lacey. Because now I had my first official proof, my first undeniable evidence. And next, I would take the first official step that would change everything. I didn't sleep much that night, not from panic. Panic burns hot and fast. What I felt was something colder, steadier. The sensation of standing on the edge of a line I had never crossed before, knowing that once I stepped forward, nothing would ever be the same. By sunrise, my decision was made. I dressed simply, tied my hair back, and drove to the police station. No theatrics, no hesitation, just forward motion. Inside, the station smelled of disinfectant and worn carpet. A young officer at the desk looked up, polite but tired. I told him I needed to file a report regarding an illegal recording device. He handed me a clipboard, but before I even filled in the first line, an older female officer approached. Short hair, strong posture, sharp eyes. "I'm Sergeant Whitford," she said. "Let's talk in my office." Her voice steadied me. Once inside, I laid everything out. The necklace, the photos, Mark's written assessment. I spoke clearly, calmly. I didn't embellish anything. I didn't speculate. I stuck to facts. Sergeant Whitford examined the necklace with a frown. "This is serious, very serious." "I know." "And you're certain who gave this to you?" "Yes." "Your daughter-in-law?" "Yes." She looked at me for a long moment. Not pitying, not judgmental, assessing. "People usually panic," she said quietly, "but you're very composed." I shrugged faintly. Fear wastes time. That earned the smallest, most respectful nod. She documented everything, took the necklace into evidence, and told me an investigator would follow up soon. I would likely be asked to provide a formal statement. They might even request a warrant later, depending on what they uncovered. Walking out of the station, I felt lighter, but also aware that the protection of the law didn't stop a desperate person from acting impulsively. I needed to stay ahead of Lacey, and she sensed it, because as soon as I got home, she was waiting. Her SUV pulled up behind me before I even reached my front door. Her window rolled down slowly, like a predator making sure its prey couldn't run. "There you are," she called brightly. "I stopped by earlier. Thought you might want some company." Company, a word that, coming from her, felt like a sliver of glass. I turned, measured her. She wore a peach-colored blouse, light makeup. A smile stretched a little too wide. "Lacey," I said evenly, "I'm busy today." She tilted her head. "Doing what?" A small question, but the tone behind it was sharp, demanding. "I don't think that's your concern." For a moment, the smile slipped. Not much, just a flicker. But I saw it. She got out of the car and walked toward me. "Is everything okay? You've been distant." "I'm fine. You didn't answer my texts." "That's right." Her eyes hardened, just a fraction. "Is something wrong between us?" "No," I said, "unless there's something you want to confess." Her breath hitched, so small most people wouldn't notice. But I did. Her pupils tightened, her shoulders squared, and the hand clutching her purse strap whitened at the knuckles. "I don't like your tone," she said quietly. "I'm not offering a tone," I replied, "just a boundary." For a moment, she said nothing. The air between us tightened. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Daniel is worried about you," a threat in the shape of concern. "Oh?" I asked, "and why is that?" "You seem confused, forgetful, irrational even." Her smile returned, brittle as frost. "You know how people can decline, sometimes early." Ah, so that was the angle. She wanted a narrative, a foundation, something she could use later. "Is that what you're planning to tell him?" I asked quietly. She blinked, startled. "What? That I'm losing my mind?" Her lips parted. She hadn't expected me to say it aloud. She certainly hadn't expected me to stay calm while doing it. "I didn't say that." "Not yet." That did it. The mask cracked again. Another small fracture. She stepped back, studying me like a chess piece she suddenly couldn't predict. Then, with a little shrug, she changed tactics. "Look, I was trying to be nice." Her voice turned cold. "But if you're going to make things difficult, that's on you." "Is it?" "You should be careful," she whispered. "People might think you're unstable." The words were quiet, but the threat behind them was enormous. I met her gaze steadily. "I have absolutely nothing to be afraid of." Her jaw tightened. Something sharp flashed in her eyes. Anger, frustration, unease. Then she turned, walked back to her SUV, and slammed the door harder than necessary. The car sped off, not gracefully, not confidently. She was rattled. Good. When the street fell silent again, I exhaled slowly. I wasn't trembling, I wasn't second-guessing myself. If anything, her reaction confirmed everything. She knew she was losing control. And people like Lacey? They didn't lose control gracefully. Inside, I poured myself iced water and sat at the kitchen table. The late afternoon light slanted across the floor, warm and soft. I let myself breathe. Slow, steady inhalations. Slow, steady exhalations. I'd crossed a threshold. There was no returning to the quiet life I'd had before this, but I didn't feel regret. I felt prepared. That night, for the first time in days, I let myself take a break. I put on comfortable clothes, played an old jazz record, and baked lemon bread, my small ritual for repairing the mind. The scent filled the house with something familiar. Something that belonged to me. As I mixed the batter, I thought about what would come next. The investigation, Daniel's inevitable confusion, Lacey's escalating desperation. I didn't delude myself into thinking this was over. No, this was the midpoint. The storm was still building. But tonight I allowed myself peace, a controlled breath before the next step. And in the quiet of my living room, with the lemon loaf cooling on the counter, I told myself, let her try. Let her reach for control again. I'm ready now. The next few days felt strangely calm. Calm in the way the air sits still before a summer storm. I wasn't fooled by it. Lacey didn't rage. She recalibrated. People like her always did. But I used the quiet. I allowed myself small reprieves, morning walks without hurry, a visit to the farmer's market, a long bath where I let the water soften the tension behind my ribs. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't retreating. I was preparing. The police hadn't called yet, but Sergeant Whitford said that preliminary processing could take a few days. I kept my phone nearby anyway, a low hum of readiness beneath everything I did. On Friday morning, as I was watering my front rose bushes, a familiar voice floated up the driveway. "Morning." Lacey. Her tone was syrupy, sweet enough to rot teeth. She walked toward me with a plastic carrier bag from a boutique I'd never stepped foot into. Inside my chest, something braced, but outwardly, I stayed loose, casual. "Lacey," I said, "you're up early." "I was running errands nearby and thought of you." She lifted the bag like a magician revealing a dove. "A little something." I didn't reach for it. She hesitated only a second before continuing. "You've been stressed, I can tell, and I just want us to get back on track." Back on track meant back under control. I wiped my hands on my gardening gloves and met her smile with a calm, cool expression. "There's no need for gifts." "Oh, but I insist," she said, and stepped closer, pushing the bag gently against my arm. Inside were lavender bath oils, a scented candle, and, of course, a little card that read, "You deserve comfort. Wear the new necklace soon." The words caught my breath for a moment. A new necklace. so she had noticed the original was missing. I looked up slowly. She kept her smile pinned in place, but tension radiated off her. Exacting, anxious tension. She needed me to accept it. She needed me to play along. She needed continuity in her plan, whatever the next phase was. I didn't take the bag. "I don't need more jewelry," I said softly. That smile of hers twitched, just slightly. It was satisfying. "Is something wrong?" she asked, voice full of weaponized concern. "No," I said. "I'm just being selective." She blinked. It wasn't the response she'd built her script around. "I'm only trying to help," she added. Daniel doesn't know anything," I interrupted gently but firmly. "And neither do you." Her eyes flashed, barely but enough, a warning strike of irritation. "Well," she breathed, "if you want to push us away, that's your right." I shrugged. "I'm not pushing anyone. I'm simply living my life." "But you've been distant." "I'm allowed to be." "That seems very defensive. Is that your diagnosis of me today?" Her jaw tightened. She wasn't expecting a woman my age to meet her with ice when she'd armed herself with honey, but she was learning, slowly, that I wasn't the soft target she imagined. She finally placed the gift bag on my porch table and stepped back. "I hope you'll reconsider," she said. "I want us to be connected. The words scraped across my nerves. She left after that, smile cracking, posture stiff. The SUV rolled away more quickly than usual. When she was gone, I exhaled slowly. I didn't touch the bag. I wouldn't even bring it inside. Instead, I picked it up with the tip of my glove and set it directly in the outdoor trash bin. That felt good, very good. Still, the encounter left a faint buzz of tension in my chest. I needed grounding, something, or someone, to steady the world back into focus. I found myself thinking about my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson. She'd lived 2 houses down for 20 years. Retired teacher, kind eyes, the sort of woman who noticed everything without prying. I walked over after lunch. She was pruning her petunias, a wide-brimmed hat shading her face. "Well, look who's out and about," she said, smiling. "Want lemonade?" I nodded. It surprised me how much the simple invitation warmed something inside me. On her porch, while we sipped cold lemonade in glasses with little ice cracks forming on the sides, she looked at me closely. "You seem troubled," she said. "Not frightened, just troubled." I didn't lie. "There's a situation with family." "Ah," she murmured. "Family can be complicated." I let that sit for a moment. The breeze stirred the wind chimes on her porch. After a long pause, I said, "Have you ever felt like someone close to you wanted more from you than they had a right to?" Mrs. Thompson exhaled thoughtfully. "Yes," she said, "and I learned something important. People who need control over others rarely stop at what's reasonable." My grip on the glass tightened just slightly. She continued, "But when you stop feeding their power, they panic, they get sloppy." It was uncanny how closely her words matched the shape of my own thoughts. I didn't tell her details. She didn't ask for any. But the conversation steadied me. It reminded me that people like Lacey were not undefeatable. They were simply used to winning, and I wasn't alone. Later that day, I called my old friend Marjorie, someone I trusted deeply, someone from before the tangled webs of my son's adult life. We talked for an hour about nothing and everything, about recipes and her grandkids, and the strange gloom that comes when someone in your life is not who they appear to be. "Listen," she said at the end, "if anything is wrong, really wrong, you call me. I don't care what time it is." Her voice was the anchor I didn't know I needed. By evening, the sun dipped low, throwing golden light across the kitchen floor. I sat with a cup of chamomile tea, feeling something rare, stability, not comfort. Comfort was still out of reach, but a grounded steadiness. Lacey had tried gifts, sugar, manipulated concern, but she couldn't crack me open like she expected. I had support now, not armies, not shields, just people who cared in simple, genuine ways. And that mattered more than I realized. I fell asleep early that night. The window cracked open, the air cool and soft. Somewhere, in the distant corners of my mind, I sensed movement on Lacey's side, planning, adjusting, recalculating. But the thought didn't rattle me. I felt ready for whatever she tried next. The next morning started quietly, too quietly. No texts, no surprise drop-ins, no probing questions from Daniel. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, Lacey had stepped back to rethink her approach. But hope is a fragile thing, and mine didn't survive past noon. At 12:17 p.m., the doorbell rang. I froze mid-step on my way to the kitchen. No one rang my doorbell in the middle of a weekday, not without warning. When I opened the door, Daniel and Lacey stood on the porch. Both of them. Daniel's expression was neutral but tense. The way he looked when he was trying to mediate a situation he didn't understand. Lacey, on the other hand, wore a soft, almost angelic smile, and that alone put my instincts on edge. "Mom," Daniel said gently, "can we come in?" The wording told me everything. They hadn't come to check on me. They'd come with an agenda. "Sure," I said. My voice was calm, almost detached. If they were expecting panic or defensiveness, they wouldn't find it here. They followed me into the living room. Lacey sat first, crossing her legs neatly at the ankle, hands folded on her lap like some suburban saint. Daniel sat beside her, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "We've been worried," Daniel began. "You've been distant lately." There it was again, the same script. Only this time the delivery was polished, coordinated. "I've been fine," I said, "just taking care of things." Lacey leaned forward slightly, her voice soft. "We want to understand what's going on. You've been acting strange, unstable, confused, paranoid." The vocabulary she was circling grew clearer with every word. I didn't speak. I just watched her. And that made her nervous. Her fingers twitched once before she tucked them under her thigh to hide it. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, we're here because we care, and because Lacey thinks, well, she thinks maybe you're dealing with something you're not talking about." "And what would that be?" I asked. He hesitated, looked at Lacey for permission. She gave the faintest nod. Daniel swallowed. "Memory issues, stress, maybe depression." I felt something inside me go very still. Not anger, not fear, just a wintry, crystalline clarity. Lacey reached out and touched Daniel's arm softly, performing affection. "Your mother is so strong, but sometimes strong people hide their struggles, and we just want her to be safe." Safe, meaning controlled, meaning monitored. "I appreciate the concern," I said, my voice steady, "but you're wrong." Daniel glanced at me, almost pleading. "Mom, what exactly is making you think I'm having memory issues?" I interrupted. Silence. That wasn't the line they expected. They anticipated defensiveness, denial, not direct confrontation with logic. Lacey's eyes flickered, left then right, like she was searching for her script. "Well," she began carefully, "last week you seemed confused at dinner." "About what?" She hesitated again. Daniel jumped in. You repeated yourself once. I raised an eyebrow. Once. Daniel, everyone repeats themselves sometimes. He faltered. I shifted slightly in my seat. What else? Lacey opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her confidence cracked for a fraction of a second. I pressed, softly but relentlessly. Please, tell me exactly what behavior concerned you. She exhaled sharply, too sharply for someone supposedly calm. We're trying to help you. No, I said quietly. You're trying to corner me. Her face flickered, anger beneath the porcelain smile. Mom, Daniel said, his voice tight, that's not fair. Isn't it? I asked. The room grew heavy. Daniel looked between us, confused and anxious. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know the camera. He didn't know the violations. And Lacey wanted to make sure he never did. Lacey finally broke. You've been acting paranoid, she said, her tone suddenly brittle. Making accusations with your eyes even when you're not saying anything. It's exhausting. I allowed a small, cold smile. What accusation do you believe I'm making? She froze. Because to answer that, she'd have to reveal what she feared, and she wouldn't dare. Instead, she shifted tactics. We think it might be best if you let us help manage things. Bills, appointments, schedules, just for a little while, until things settle. My chest tightened, not with fear but with understanding. This was the goal. This had always been the goal. Control my life, control my finances, control my independence. The camera wasn't a mistake, it was step one. Daniel exhaled, rubbing his palms together. Mom, it's okay to let us help. Everyone needs support sometimes. I studied him. He wasn't malicious. He wasn't plotting. He was being guided carefully, subtly, by a woman who knew exactly which emotional strings to pull. Then I asked the question that changed everything. Daniel, did you notice anything unusual about the necklace Lacey gave me? He blinked. The necklace? Yes, the one she insisted I wear every day. Lacey stiffened. It was so slight Daniel didn't notice, but I did. What about it? He asked. I held his gaze. Did you know there was technology inside it? Lacey's breath hitched, a tiny involuntary gasp. Daniel turned to her, confused. Lace! She shook her head too quickly. She's making something out of nothing. It's just jewelry. Is it? My voice was soft, controlled. Lacey looked at me as if I were holding a lit match too close to a fuse she'd hoped I'd never find. Daniel frowned. Mom, what are you saying? Before I could answer, Lacey snapped. This is exactly what I meant, she burst out, her voice sharp and high. She's inventing things, accusing me, twisting everything. The mask dropped. For the first time, Daniel saw a flash, just a flash of who she really was. Lacey, he said quietly, wary. She shot to her feet. I won't sit here and be attacked. I didn't move. No one attacked you. You're implying. I'm asking questions. Her face flushed with anger. She grabbed her purse off the couch as if she might hurl it. Daniel stood too. Maybe we should all calm down. Lacey spun toward the door. I'm done with this. If she wants to ruin everything, fine. She fled, her footsteps hard on the wooden floor. Daniel followed her, torn between concern for his mother and loyalty to his wife. Mom, he said at the doorway, I don't know what's happening, but please don't push us away. I'm not, I said gently, but I won't be manipulated. He swallowed, nodded weakly, and left. When the door closed, the silence felt enormous, but I didn't feel shaken. Not this time. I felt resolute. Lacey had shown her true face. She'd tried sweetness first, then guilt, then manipulation, and now rage. She was unraveling, and fear in people like her didn't make them retreat. It made them reckless. I stood in the center of my quiet living room and let the truth settle inside me like an anchor. This wasn't just a conflict anymore. It was a confrontation. And I wasn't backing down. For the next 48 hours, I moved through my home like someone preparing for a storm they could already smell in the air. I double-checked every file, every saved photo, every note. I backed up everything twice. I kept the sealed envelope, my insurance policy, where only I knew, and I waited. Because Lacey wasn't going to let things end with that outburst. Anger wasn't her nature. Calculated control was. Rage meant she had lost leverage, and people like her didn't tolerate loss. The call came on Sunday morning. A block number, a deep breath. Then I answered. "This is Sergeant Whitford," the voice said. "We need you to come in today. We've completed our initial findings." Her tone was clipped, serious. I agreed immediately. When I pulled into the police station parking lot, I saw Daniel's car. My stomach tightened, not in fear, but in anticipation. If he was here, it meant Lacey had learned something, or sensed something, and she'd gone on the offensive. Inside, near the reception desk, Daniel stood with his hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. Next to him, perched stiffly in a chair, was Lacey. Her expression was composed to perfection, but her eyes flicked to me with sharp, assessing fear. She wasn't in control anymore. She knew it. I saw it. "Mom," Daniel said, voice uncertain. "The police called us too. They said this was about a report?" Before I could answer, Sergeant Whitford stepped forward. "Let's discuss this in a private room." We followed her down a hallway into a small interview room. Neutral walls, a table, 4 chairs. We sat. Lacey crossed her arms and lifted her chin like she was bracing for combat. Sergeant Whitford laid a folder on the table. "Mrs. Turner," she said to me, "based on the evidence you provided, our technician verified the presence of an active recording device inside the necklace." The words dropped into the room with weight. Daniel's head snapped toward Lacey. Lacey didn't move, not even a blink. "It is," the sergeant continued, "a functioning covert camera capable of live transmission." "Live?" Daniel repeated, stunned. "Yes," Whitford said, "which raises several serious legal concerns." A crack opened in the air, small but deep. Daniel turned fully toward his wife. "Lacey, what is she talking about?" Lacey's voice emerged, brittle but steady. "I don't know. I gave her a regular necklace. She must be confused or misinformed." The sergeant's gaze hardened. "Our lab analysis was conclusive." Lacey's jaw flexed. Anyone could have tampered with it. Daniel looked at her with growing uncertainty. Why would someone do that? I met his eyes. "Your wife asked me to wear it every day, Daniel." Lacey exhaled sharply. "It was a gift." "A gift with a camera in it," I replied calmly. She turned to Daniel, eyes wide with rehearsed innocence. "Danny, she's twisting everything. You know she's been off lately." I watched his expression, saw the confusion, the love, the fear, the instinct to protect his spouse. But I also saw the foundation of trust he had in her start to shift. "Lacey," he said quietly, "did you buy the necklace online? Did you check the listing? Could someone have sold you something with a device inside?" It was a lifeline, a way out, an excuse. She didn't take it. Instead, she slipped, fatally. "I didn't buy it online," she shot back. "I had it custom made." The room froze. Her face paled. Mine did not. Daniel blinked slowly. Custom made with a hidden camera? That's not what I... She stopped, realizing too late the trap she'd walked into. Sergeant Whitford leaned forward. Mrs. Turner, do you wish to amend your statement? Lacey's breathing quickened. Her composure crumbled in fragments. Okay, this is insane, she snapped. Why would I ever spy on her? What would I possibly gain? My voice was soft, but it cut like glass. Control. Daniel's head jerked toward me. I turned to him. She wanted control over my routines, my home, my decisions, and eventually, my independence. His face drained of color. Lacey, he whispered. What is she talking about? She stood abruptly, the chair scraping hard against the floor. You're going to take her side? After everything I've done for this family? This isn't sides, he said, voice tight. This is evidence. She turned her fury on me. You've been poisoning him against me for months. I've done nothing, I said. Your actions brought us here. Her voice rose, sharp and desperate. You never liked me. You never respected my role in this family. And planting a camera in my necklace was meant to fix that? She flinched, an involuntary twitch, raw and telling. Daniel stared at her like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Lacey, tell me you didn't do this. She tried to speak, but her breath stuttered. I was trying to... Then, in a burst of panic, she pointed at me. She can't live alone. She shouldn't. Someone needs to keep an eye on her. There it was, the truth. Raw, unfiltered, ugly. Daniel's shoulders sagged. Oh, God! Sergeant Whitford stood. Mrs. Turner, this is enough. You need to step outside. No, Lacey shouted. I'm not leaving. I won't let her ruin everything. Her voice cracked, splintered. She grabbed Daniel's arm, her fingers digging in. Danny, you know she's slipping. You've seen it. She gets confused. She repeats things. That's not true, he said sharply, pulling away. I watched the realization wash over him, not all at once, but in waves. The suspicion, the doubt, the puzzle pieces aligning. Finally, he looked at his wife with heartbreak. What were you planning, Lacey? Her expression collapsed. Rage, fear, hatred, desperation flashing all at once. I did what needed to be done. I inhaled slowly, a calm, deep breath. Whitford escorted her out of the room, her protests echoing down the hall. When the door closed, Daniel sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For a moment, there was silence. Then he whispered, Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it. I sat across from him, steady and quiet. It's not your fault, I said. She hid her intentions well. He lifted his head. His eyes were red. What happens now? Now? Now we dismantled everything Lacey had built. With evidence, with truth, with unshakable clarity. And I felt no fear, only certainty. Daniel stayed seated for a long moment, shoulders sagging, hands clasped like he was trying to hold his entire world together. I watched him quietly. He wasn't the enemy. He never had been. He was collateral damage in someone else's campaign for control. When he finally lifted his head, I saw the shift in his eyes. Something broken, yes, but something awakened too. The fog Lacey had kept him in for years had thinned. He could see her clearly now. Mom, he said softly, whatever you need, whatever happens next, I'll support you. I nodded, not trusting my voice for a moment. Sergeant Whitford re-entered the room, calm and professional. Mrs. Turner, she addressed me, we will be forwarding this case to the district attorney. The evidence is strong, very strong. Daniel swallowed. What What charges are we talking about? Whitford didn't sugarcoat it. Unlawful surveillance, invasion of privacy, stalking, and potential elder coercion. The DA may add more depending on what further investigation reveals. Daniel leaned back in his chair as if the air had been knocked out of him. Lacey had done this to herself, to him, to us. Whitford turned to me again. We'll need a full written statement. We can do it today or schedule it for tomorrow. Today, I said. My voice was steady. Let's finish this. While she prepared the paperwork, Lacey was kept in another room. I could hear faint bits of her voice through the wall, high-pitched, frantic, desperate. She wasn't the calm manipulator anymore. Her control had shattered. All that remained was panic. The irony wasn't lost on me. People who try to trap others often end up trapped by the very illusions they create. I completed my formal statement. Factual, chronological, detailed. I included the texts, the behavioral patterns, Mark's analysis, the incident on the porch, the attempted manipulation with Daniel, and the confrontation in my living room. I was careful, not vindictive, not emotional, just precise. Afterward, Daniel and I sat together in the lobby while the officers processed Lacey's case. The wall clock ticked loudly. It felt surreal, like waiting for medical results you already know the answer to. Finally, Whitford approached us. "She'll be released today," she said, "pending further investigation, but there will be conditions." "Conditions?" Daniel asked. Whitford nodded. "She's forbidden from approaching your mother. No calls, no messages, no visits. Violation will result in immediate arrest." Daniel exhaled shakily. What about me?" "You're free to see her," Whitford said gently. "But for now, I recommend distance until you understand her involvement fully." He nodded, though his expression was turbulent. I placed a hand on his arm. "You need time, sweetheart. Take it." He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with quiet resolve. "I'm staying with a friend tonight. I need space to think." "That's wise," I said softly. Before we left the station, Daniel stopped me by the doors. "I should have protected you sooner," he whispered. "You see the truth now," I replied. "That's enough." He hugged me, a long, trembling hug that held both apology and gratitude. When I drove home, the afternoon sun was lowering behind the trees, casting long shadows across my driveway. I parked, sat for a moment in the stillness of the car, and allowed myself to absorb everything. The fear was gone. The confusion was gone. The burden of silence was gone. What remained was strength, a quiet, sharpened strength that felt like it had been forged in fire. Inside, the house felt different, lighter. I made tea, stood by the window, and watched the street. At one point, a car passed slowly, but it wasn't Lacey's. And even if it had been, I wasn't afraid of her anymore. That night, I allowed myself something I hadn't felt since this began. Rest. Real, deep rest. The kind where your bones feel warm and your mind stops bracing for the next blow. The next morning, I woke early, opened the curtains, and let the sunlight spill across the floorboards. I made breakfast, simple toast with butter and apricot jam, and ate it while listening to the quiet hum of my old radio. Around 10, my phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. "Daniel, I spoke to Lacey. She admitted most of it. She's angry, but she knows it's over. I'm going to stay with Ryan for a while. Thank you for telling the truth." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Me, take care of yourself. I'm here when you're ready." His reply came quickly. "Daniel, I love you, Mom." Simple words, heavy with meaning. Later in the afternoon, I received a call from the district attorney's office. The case was moving forward. They had authorized a formal investigation into Lacey's actions. They wanted additional background information, previous interactions, any patterns of coercion. The wheels of justice, slow but deliberate, had begun to turn in my favor. When I hung up, I stepped outside into my backyard. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and faintly of lemon, some leftover trace from the bread I'd baked. I stood under the open sky, breathing deeply. This was what freedom felt like. Not the absence of danger, but the presence of clarity. Later that evening, I went through my home one last time, checking locks, organizing files, ensuring everything was documented. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted to close this chapter with intention. As night fell, my phone vibrated again, a number I didn't recognize, a voicemail. I listened. It was Lacey. Her voice was a mix of anger and something brittle, something like humiliation. You think you've won. You have no idea what you've started. Another pause, a shaky inhale. But it doesn't matter now. Daniel's turned against me. Everything is ruined. I hope you're happy. I deleted the message. I didn't need her words in my home. I stood in the hallway, the phone heavy in my hand, and felt a profound, quiet certainty bloom inside me. Yes, I had won. Not through yelling, not through emotional theatrics, but through truth, evidence, and resilience. Lacey's world was cracking. Mine was stabilizing. Tomorrow, life would begin shifting towards something new, something peaceful, something mine, and she could no longer touch it. In the days that followed, my world shifted in ways both subtle and profound. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, like a house finally settling after a long storm. Every corner of my home felt different, not because anything had changed physically, but because the weight of watching, of wondering, of bracing had lifted. I woke earlier than usual now, not because of anxiety, but because I wanted to. I liked the mornings, the soft light coming through the windows, the stillness before the neighborhood woke up, the warm smell of coffee. It felt like reclaiming something I had almost lost. The police kept me updated. The district attorney's office was thorough. They asked more questions, reviewed more evidence, and confirmed that the camera had been transmitting to a handheld receiver. They couldn't prove how often Lacey watched me, but they could prove the device was operational and intentionally placed. That alone was enough. One afternoon, while I was sitting at my kitchen table watering my small collection of herbs, Sergeant Whitford called. "Mrs. Turner," she said, "the DA is moving forward with charges. We'll let you know once the court date is set." I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing the words like warm sunlight. "Thank you," I said softly. "Are you doing all right?" she asked. And I realized I truly was. After I hung up, I stepped into my backyard with a cup of tea and just stood there, listening to the birds, feeling the cool breeze, letting my shoulders finally drop. For the first time in weeks, nothing inside me was coiled. Daniel visited 2 days later. He knocked gently, as if afraid he might disrupt something fragile. When I opened the door, he looked tired, older somehow, but clearer. There was no fog in his eyes now, no defensiveness, just a deep, quiet sorrow. "Hi, Mom." I pulled him into a hug before he could say anything else. He let out a shaky breath, relaxing into it. He sat at the table while I made tea. When I joined him, he held the mug in both hands, turning it slowly. "She moved out," he finally said. "She's staying with her sister. Won't talk to me, won't explain anything." He paused. Or maybe she can't. "That's not on you," I told him. He nodded, staring at the tea. I think she believed what she was doing was justified, somehow, in her mind. I didn't respond. He wasn't excusing her. He was trying to understand the woman he thought he'd married. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for not seeing it sooner." "You see it now," I said gently. "That's enough." He looked up, his eyes full of apology and something else. Gratitude. "I don't want to lose you," he said. "You won't," I answered. "Not for a second." We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about normal things, recipes, the garden, the new job opportunity he'd been considering. When he left, he hugged me again, longer this time. And for the first time since this entire nightmare began, I felt something close to peace when I watched him drive away. Meanwhile, Lacey's world was unraveling. I didn't seek out updates, but small pieces found me anyway. A neighbor of theirs, someone who always kept track of the neighborhood's stories, stopped me during a walk. "Did you hear?" she whispered, like sharing a secret from a TV drama. "Lacey's in real trouble. Police, lawyer meetings, something about spying." I gave a polite, non-committal nod. "I hope things resolve," I said calmly and left it at that. But the truth was, things weren't resolving for Lacey. They were collapsing. Daniel told me later that her company had gotten wind of the charges. HR had placed her on leave, pending internal review. In a career that relied on trust and polished professionalism, scandal was poison. "She keeps blaming you," he said quietly. "She's allowed to," I replied. "Blame is easier than truth." He nodded, understanding more than he once would have. My own life steadied into a new rhythm. I baked more. I tended my garden with fresh intention. I redecorated my living room, rearranging furniture and donating old things that carried the stale weight of the past few years. It felt symbolic, like opening windows in a long, closed room. Mrs. Thompson invited me for tea on her porch more often. Her calm presence was grounding, like a lighthouse in fog. We didn't talk about the case much. Instead, we talked about recipes, local gossip, her flowers. The world felt normal around her. Marjorie called often, too, checking in, offering warmth and humor. I told her more details now, and she didn't gasp or judge. She just listened. "You handled this with grace," she told me. "Not everyone could." Grace. The word sat softly inside me. I realized she was right. I hadn't lashed out. I hadn't retaliated emotionally. I had simply followed the truth to its end. The truth was stronger than any performance. One Friday evening, after cleaning the kitchen, I lit a candle and opened the back door to let in the cool air. The yard looked peaceful in the fading dusk, soft blue shadows, faint chirping from somewhere in the trees. And I found myself thinking, this is what my life should feel like. Not watched, not questioned, not managed, just lived. My home had become mine again, not a stage for someone else's plans. I poured myself a small glass of wine and took it to the porch. The night was warm, the sky deep, the world quiet, and I realized something. The storm had passed, and I was still standing, stronger than before. As for Lacey, the storm was only beginning for her. The investigation was advancing. The charges were real. The social fallout was immediate. Her marriage was unraveling. Her reputation was damaged. And no carefully curated smile could save her from consequences she'd earned. She had tried to control my life, but she'd lost control of hers. I sipped my wine, listening to the distant hum of cars and the soft rustle of leaves. Tomorrow would be a new day, a peaceful one, a life reclaimed. And I was ready for it. Sometimes victory doesn't look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like a quiet house, a morning cup of coffee, and the simple knowledge that no one is watching you anymore. I got my life back, my peace, my dignity. And the person who tried to take it from me lost everything she built on lies. But let me ask you something, honestly. What would you have done in my place? Would you have noticed the signs sooner, confronted her sooner, stayed quiet, fought louder? Tell me in the comments. Share your story. And if you want more real-life dramas like this, stay with me.